Namaste, Namaskar, Salam Alaikum, Jai Bim to everyone who is here.
Yes.
Vanakkam.
Vanakkam. And in Odisha, we also can say Jai Jagannath. Jagannath.
Jai Jagannath.
Jai Jagannath. Sir Randhir?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Now we are also live stream on our Facebook platform. And I am attending this program with a beautiful place called Gandhian, Gandhi Peace Foundation, which is a kind of source for inspiration for all of us who engaged in the sadhana of Gandhian thought, Gandhian practice and all.
Yeah.
I, Randhir Kumar Gautam, on behalf of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Inclusiving, welcome to attend today's Swadhyay Sahchakra weekly dialogue. We have with us Professor David Willis from USA. He is a spirited Gandhian and he has a deep engagement with education, nature studies, and environmental studies. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation. I extend a very warm welcome to MD Chandar Sahab from Gandhi Peace Foundation, Amardeep Bhai, Professor Ananta, Giri, Professor Mohanty, Dr. Sipra, and all friends co-present here. Today we are going to talk about the very important topic, that is experiments in creative education in Japan. So for giving a kind of brief introduction to the topic, I request Professor Anant Kumar Giri to give a kind of background of the topic, and then we will hear from
so much, dear. Thank you so much, dear Randhir, and a warm welcome to Professor David Willis and friends co-present. It is a joy for me and us to be together here this afternoon, this evening. And I'm especially happy that we are greeting you from Balashore. In fact, myself and Minati, we are co-present in Minati's sister home at this moment. And both of us, we are in a cultural event yesterday and today, a newspaper named Aparanha. And Minati has been writing there for the last many years, more than 10 years. And she was today felicitated in this. So it is a humble example of creativity, how creativity brings us together. And the journey of creativity flows, the theme of our discussion this afternoon, creative education in Japan, experiments in creative education in Japan. Professor Willis has worked on this, and many years ago in 2001, he has co-edited a book on Japanese education in transition, many 20 years ago. And one important aspect of Professor Willis' work is the intercultural dimension, intercultural education. And though Japanese society is a very creative society, but creativity and conformity, unfortunately, sometimes creativity is kind of shadowed by conformity. So how does Japanese education, cope of the challenge of conformity and creativity? My elementary experience with this educational landscape is that till primary education, that Japanese students, they have a very creative method, as for example, as exemplified in the exemplary school established by Kobayashi, and which was named Toto-chan, and the kind of freedom and the story of this school. And Toto-chan herself later on grew to be an inspiring television personality. Her own autobiography, Toto-chan, the little girl at the window, suggests that how girls and children like Toto-chan, they feel suffocated in conventional school system, and how the school established by Kobayashi named Tomo Gakuen provided a space to souls like Toto-chan. So this is one aspect of the challenge. Professor Willis would help us to understand it. The other thing is that the whole burden of peace education, and the other thing is intercultural education. And though Japanese society is such an inspiring society, but in terms of intercultural exchange, intercultural learning, and there's a lot of challenge there, especially relationship between the Koreans and the Japanese and the challenge of history. This is an ongoing process. So, and of course, Japanese society has also become globalized like all societies. So there has been a foundation called the Intercultural Education Society of Japan, almost more than 40 years ago. And their motto is make a difference through difference. And Professor Willis also has worked on that. And the third challenge, the challenge of peace education, because this whole challenge of society and conformity and militarism. And here we would remember the work of Makiguchi, who was a teacher, geography teacher in a school, and he wrote a book called Towards a Geography of Human Life, in which he challenges us to realize the two most important aspects of human life. One is the culture where we are born, and the other is the locality where we are born and the Mother Earth. So therefore, this is one stream in Japanese consciousness, this Makiguchi stream, but also there has been the burden of militaristic nationalism. And I think with the changing context, Japan now reverting back to a kind of militarism, and how education is prepared. As we see in India, now many of us are struggling with the changes in the NCERT textbook, the pain and suffering that is creating. So with some of the challenges that are with us, so now I invite Professor Willis to help us in our journey together on this theme, please.
Thank you very much, Ananta. And again, namaste, salam alaikum, Jai Bim, namaskar, vanakkam, and of course, Odia. What is it again? Jai Jagat? No, Jai Jagannath. Is that correct? I've only been to Orissa once, so I have to come back for sure. And I would like at the beginning simply to say a prayer for the people, the migrants who are lost in Balasore. It is an extreme tragedy in the world, what has just happened. And it is a tragedy for all of us. And we need to recognize that who was lost. Only 2 reserve passengers, I just read about an hour ago, only 2 reserve passengers died. Almost all of the people who died were migrants who were going from eastern or northern India to southern India to work, or coming back from there, I guess is what it was in this case. Very sad what's happening. Also very sad what is happening with Indian education. I'm so sorry to hear about the textbooks and the removal of science from the textbooks. It is very shocking. In fact, it's unbelievable what is happening. And at the same time, we have these issues of conformity all over the world. And it raises some questions about education and what education means. I'm going to share with you for probably about 20 minutes or so in my talk, and I will also share with you some resources, which I will put in the chat. And I suppose maybe Randhir and Ananta, you can share those resources later for the folks who are coming on the YouTube and so on. Great felicitations for doing this, the Vishwaneedam Center, and for MIDS doing this important work. There are a lot of questions that I think we can look at here, but we also should, thank you for the word sadhana. We should, at the very beginning, reflect on our own sadhana in terms of education. Where are we in terms of education? I'm moving into, let's see, this is my 48th year of teaching, and it has been my life to be a teacher. And I have some reflections on that in the Japanese context. My teaching in Japan actually altogether would be 30 years teaching in Japan, 23 of those years teaching in university, in a Buddhist women's university in Osaka, Japan. But I also taught in international schools in Yokohama, Japan, and in Kodaikanal, South India, and in Kobe, Japan. And I was involved with the International Baccalaureate, which is in many ways the gold standard for secondary education in the world. If you would like to see some good ideas about education, I can refer you to the IB, to the International Baccalaureate, which has very deep roots both in French and in English and in Swiss and in German educations. So it's a wonderful sadhana to address these questions. And of course, the major question of peace education. We are at a bottleneck for humanity. I like to think about the American indigenous people, the Indians of America. And of course, they need a better name than Indians because you all are Indians and the people in South Asia are Indians. So the indigenous tribes of North America believe that you should consider the 7 generations who came before you and the 7 generations who will come after you. Whenever you do anything, whenever you have any sadhana, you should consider those 7 generations who came before and the 7 generations who are to come. We are at a moment, this bottleneck, where there might not be future generations. It could be in our lifetimes or in this century, it could be that it's the end of consciousness, human consciousness. Forget about education and creativity and all those things. Simply put, the end of humanity is very possible. And we have lots of existential threats that are out there. It's very important, I think, in our sadhana of education to be looking at those existential threats and sharing those with our students and with our colleagues. I think about a wonderful book, which you can find online in a PDF, Teaching as a Subversive Activity by Weingartner and Postman, Teaching as a Subversive Activity. Of course, I'm also referring to here to the wonderful author Ivan Illich, who wrote Deschooling Society. Those 2 books, I think, can give us some really wonderful ideas about education. Of course, Gandhiji and the ideas of Nai Talim also, and of course, wonderful Rabindranathji and Shanti Niketan. I mean, talk about creativity in education. India has lots of creativity in education. So I want to acknowledge that first, in spite of what's happening with NSERT in the textbooks and so on right now. And I have confidence that India will move beyond these challenges to a better, brighter place. I'm an optimist by nature, in spite of the existential threats that we're facing right now. So I'll have 3 parts to my talk. First, I would like to share just a little bit about our question here of experiments in creative education in Japan, and a bit about the history of Japanese education, just a little bit to give some background to some of the major points here. Then I would like to talk about out of the norm, the experiments out of the norm, as Professor Giri Ananta has just mentioned. Toto-chan, in Japanese, the title of the book, Madogiwa no Toto-chan. So Madogiwa means the abandoned person, or the person who is thrown out of society. They have been pushed out, exiled from society. And in her case, she was thrown out of her previous school, and she ended up going to this wonderful school, which was held in train cars, and it was the beginning of the Second World War in Japan. Actually, I think Japan had already been at war for some time. And that's another thing we all need to recognize. We are all at war right now in the world. It's not just the Ukraine. 7 million people have died in Africa in the last 30 years in the Congo. And it's something we don't recognize. There are conflicts going on everywhere right now. And we need to recognize the importance of peace education. My wife, my partner Mika, and I last week visited with two of our Buddhist monk friends and one of our Gandhian friends, Bhumi Kumar, the son of Krishnamal Jagannathan. Some of you may know Amma Krishnamal Jagannathan. She's Padma Shri or Padma Bhushan. I think both. I think she has both of those. Anyway, Bhumi came and we all went to Hiroshima. And I maybe will share a few thoughts from that as well. But the importance of peace education cannot be underestimated here. It is really, really important for us as a species. And, forget about Japan or India or America or whatever. As a species, if we are going to continue, we need to look at some of these things. I will also share with you some thoughts from my own family's education. I'm a permanent resident of Japan, but we live much of the year now in California, where I work for Fielding Graduate University, which is a place for adults to come back to school to get a PhD. And the vision of this university, which is nearly 50 years old, nonprofit university, is the scholar practitioner. That the work of the hands is as important as the work of the mind. And of course, we also should include the work of the heart as well, which of course, much of the best education in the world has all three of those. So I'll share a bit about that too at the end with reference to my own family, to my own two sons and the education they have received. That may be of interest to you as well. Well, so I'm an educational anthropologist, educational ethnographer. I am also a comparative educator, and I taught for 10 years in international high schools, the IB, as I mentioned, in Japan and in India. And I have been teaching in universities now for, my goodness, let me think about this, 38 years. So I've been teaching in universities for 38 years and in Japan, for most of that time, but my time teaching out of California is, also coming up to about the same number of years. So experiments, practice, education. I think we need to consider, what do we mean by experiment also? And what do we mean by practice? So in some ways, the practice of Japanese education is an experiment from the perspective of people from outside Japan. For the Japanese, it's simply, yes, you should do education this way. So, for example, my own two sons, when they went through Japanese schooling until high school, until the end of the middle school. Their names are Jeffrey and Luke. Their Japanese names Ryuta and Yosuke, and they their education in the Japanese schools in the beginning was not about achievement, but it was about effort. And it was about thinking about other people first. So anyway, what is the purpose of education? Is it for the society? Is it for the individual? I like to think that it's for the collective human good. I'd like to put it in a bigger stage maybe, but how it's all framed and how we might look at it. When we think about experiments in creative education, one of the reasons for those experiments is because we think the education system we have now is perhaps not adequate. It's not doing the job that it should do. So we need some sort of reform. We need some kind of reform. And we notice in Japan, as we do in India and the United States and many other places, this cycle of reforms that happens. It's often thrown up as, what are we going to do? The Chinese are ahead of us in education, or the Japanese are ahead of us in education, or the Europeans, the Britishers, or the Americans are ahead of us in education. What do? We need some reform. We have to address these problems. So it's in response to what is perceived as a problem. But in fact, the problem is us. It's human beings, and the need for creative experimentation and reform is really much more, I think, about the collective human good. My own studies have been about cultural transmission. I was so interested when I was first in India in 1970. My goodness, this is a long time ago, isn't it? More than 50 years ago when I first came to India. I was interested to see how the culture had moved from North India to South India. And then later, when I traveled to Southeast Asia, how the culture had moved from South Asia to Southeast Asia and on up to East Asia. I mean, my goodness, we have a Ganesh temple not too far from where my wife's home is in Osaka. We just passed through a station, a railway station called Bentencho. Benten-sama is Saraswati. So, you know, the culture has flowed. It's been this cultural transmission. And I'm interested in the intergenerational and intercultural aspects of this flow of these ideas and all. So if we think about education for the collective human good, you know, perhaps we should look at reports, for example, from UNICEF, and I'll share one of these reports later. Very interesting results from that report in terms of Japan for the physical health of the 38 developed countries. And I think India should probably be considered in that group at this point. However, we still have great poverty in India too, as you all know. So at any rate, there are 38 countries in this UNICEF report, which I'll share with you later. I'll put the links later into the chat of all these different things. Japan is #1 in physical skills, #1 in physical health, physical skills. But Japan for mental health for the children is number 37. So this indicates that there are some problems in the system. And my own perspective on that is that the problems in the system come with the academic competition later, not the primary education, like Ananta is mentioning too, the wonders of the primary education, but later in the achievement cycles. And the Korean education system is even more challenged in lots of ways there. So a few years ago, a colleague and I did a book on reimagining Japanese education. I'll share some of that with you too. Jeremy Rapley is his name. Jeremy is a professor at Kyoto University, which is a top tier, university in Japan. It's like, what would we say? Kyoto University is maybe like the Yale of Japan, or, Tokyo University being the Harvard of Japan, something like that. Anyway, Jeremy and I did this book, and we were thinking we should look at Japanese education again. And there's a new book that has just come out, which is available online. Again, I'm going to put all of these into the chat later. And please, if you have questions, if you would kindly put them in the chat, because I would like to provide some time for discussion. There's some great voices on Japanese education now. I would not count myself as one of those, although I do have a background in Japanese education research and all, but certainly Jeremy Rapley would be one of those people. Keita Takayama is another of those people. Takehiko Kariya at Oxford, sociologist at Oxford University, is another one of those. Ryoko Tsuneyoshi at University of Tokyo is another one of these great scholars of Japanese education. And they are all interested in creativity in education and how you can stimulate curiosity and so on. And certainly Tetsuko Kurenagi, the author of Toto-chan, which is a true story. It's not a novel. It's a true story, Toto-chan. And as I understand, it has been translated into 11 Indian languages. So there are some pretty important directions in the research that these people I just mentioned are taking. And the most important direction, I'll just mention it briefly now, and then I'm sure in future sessions we can take this up, is the decolonization of education. The need for decolonizing the perspectives we have received from imperial states. And in the case of Japan, Imperial Japan is still lingering here in the background in some ways. Of course, for South Asia, Imperial Britain, England is lingering there. So the decolonial Southern turn is what we need to be looking at now. We have the great inspiration of Gayatri Spivak and others who are doing the subaltern studies, Homi Bhabha, of course, Edward Said and Orientalism. So moving beyond is where we need to be with all these things. So education in Japan, just a few quick comments about history and all. It's always been very important for the Japanese. Education has always been highly regarded. The first novel in the world is by a Japanese woman, The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu. And I can't emphasize enough how important the respect that teachers receive in Japan is. So the word for teacher in Japanese is sensei. Sensei means the one who comes before, and they are highly respected and they are highly paid in the society. So if you're looking for creativity in education, pay your teachers well, train them well. The other perspective from Japan that I think really supports this idea of a creative education is education is lifelong. And it includes arts education. It includes working with the hands, craft as an art. So pottery making, it's not a low-class thing, a folk tradition, like it is in many countries. It is an art. So craft as an art. And part of this too is folks in South Asia are very familiar with this from the Bhagavad Gita and other great texts. If there is a job to do, you do the job well. And the spirit in Japan is called Gambaru Seishin. Gambaru, you do the job. If you have a job, you do the job the best you can. 100% effort. No, I'm sorry. 150% effort should be. So if you have a job to do, you do it well. And along with this goes the idea education is lifelong. And a part of this is the aesthetic education. My goodness, police in Japan study flower arrangement. You can see policemen doing flower arrangement. I mean, the aesthetics is very powerful. And this is different from China and Korea, where there were mandarins who were just about the work of the mind. And they would even make a point of growing the fingernail on their pinky, on their little finger, very long to show that they didn't have to work in the fields. They didn't have to work with their hands. Or, we can say this is true for Brahmins in India too, who have other people to do the work for them. So yeah, Japan is a bit different place than these others where the work of the hands, the work of the mind, the work of the heart are all appreciated. Very high literacy in Japan. Even in the 1840s, Japan had the highest literacy in the world. So the pre-modern state of Japan had a higher literacy than European countries. And this had to do with temple schools called terakoya, also samurai schools. And this is rather unheard of in the rest of the world to have such a high rate of literacy. And it was a real jump start for Japan's modernization. Japanese culture is a blend, and this is true of education too. It's a blend of Buddhist ideas and Shinto ideas, this, indigenous religion here, and then Confucian approaches to society that come from outside. And I have to say this is a genius of Japan too, is this idea of letting things in, letting things come in from outside, and letting things blend, and looking for this permeability to outside ideas that are going to support you. And this also has to do with resistance. Some ideas you don't let in. Some ideas you keep out. And you have to look at this very carefully. And which of your own traditional ideas you're going to keep, and which of your own traditional ideas you're going to let go, that they're not working well for you now compared to before. So borrowing from elsewhere has been a big part of Japanese education, borrowing from the Chinese, borrowing from the Koreans, borrowing from the Dutch during the longest period of peace in world history was the time of isolation in Japan. Japan for nearly 250 years had no war. There was no war at all. That's something to learn from. And the society developed in very stable ways. But then, of course, the modernization was a challenge from the middle of the 19th century. And one of the ways to deal with the modernization was to import scholars, teachers, engineers from outside. And these were, the Japanese sent missions to Europe and North America. The Iwakura mission is the most famous. And they returned with ideas about school boards, teacher autonomy, and so on. And they had trial and error for many of these ideas. And elementary school initially was opposed by most people. We already have education in our villages and all. Why do we have to have a national education? And they were very suspicious of the national education effort in the beginning, because it was also the same time when when conscription for the military had come into the country as a whole. So these two were tied together in the minds of common folk, and there were rebellions against the imposition of national education. At any rate, the rebellions did not last, and the public education was brought along. And as we know, Japan developed so much that Japan itself became an imperial power. Japan was the first non-European power to defeat a European nation. In the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, the Japanese sank the entire Russian Navy. The Russian Navy came over towards Japan, and the Japanese, they crossed the T, as they say in the naval maneuver, and they sank all the ships. And so Japan has been an inspiration for non-European nations for a long time, for lots of good reasons. Anyway, back to the Meiji era, we had these people called the Yatoi, the Oyatoi Gaikokujin, they called them. So the hired foreigners who were brought in. So for about 30 or 40 years, they helped to establish the modern education system. And part of that also included experiments like Montessori education. And higher education was established around the, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The top Japanese universities, Todai, Tokyo University, Kyodai, Kyoto University, Handai, Osaka University, Kyudai, Kyushu University. And then there's a next tier rank, which is Kobe, Tohoku, Nagoya, and so on. And then Christian education in Japan is also established. So this is interesting. There's some parallels here, and actually some of the same people even, between the missionaries in India bringing education and the missionaries in Japan bringing education. And these are both Protestant and Catholic missionaries. The Catholic missionaries, of course, earlier, probably the more successful experiments were the Protestant schools in lots of ways. And even after World War II, there was a Christian university in Japan, ICU, International Christian University, which was established as a creative experiment, which was to have all the classes bilingually in English and in Japanese. And even today, ICU does that. It's a wonderful university in lots of ways. And anyway, as we know, militarism came to Japan, and the education system was utilized in support of the military and in support of colonialism, imperialism of Japan, and in support of some really horrific things. And so we should note that education can be used for good, should be, but can also be used for bad. And we saw the same thing, of course, with Nazi Germany and some other places. When the Americans defeated Japan with the horrific bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, then the next thing that we see is the occupation by the American forces, and they completely democratized the Japanese education system. And this democratization includes strengthening teacher unions. So teacher unions are a very major part of Japanese education after 1945. And the nationalistic morals course is abolished, although we do have somewhat of a morals course still in Japan called Dotoku. But still, there was also more independence at the local level in some ways. And then Japan, of course, as it develops economically, also the higher education system in general, is supported very much. And this is when we start to see some questions about education system. Maybe there's too much rote learning. Maybe there's too much memorization. And it's right around this time that the book Toto-chan comes out. And I have to say, it's one of my favorite books. I've read Toto-chan 6 or 7 times, and it never fails to bring some tears to my eyes to think about the education of children and what's important in education. And I have taught the book in teacher colleges here in Japan, and the students are always just, of course, they've already read it once. You read it again, read it again. It's a very powerful book. The author, Tetsuko Kuryanagi, is Japan's most popular television personality. She established the first talk show on Japanese TV. And Toto-chan, the book, is the best-selling book in Japanese history. No other book has sold as well. So you can see the appeal of the kind of creative experimentation that we find from Toto-chan, the little girl at the window. This is, as I said, it's been translated into many Indian languages, so many of you are probably familiar with the book already. It's also a satire on formal education. And it's a satire on formal education for, I think, not just Japan, but any formal education system. And Tomoe Gakuen is just a wonderful example of how you can do things a little differently. And we also have a school in Japan now called Kinokuni. Kinokuni, and again, I'm going to put the links to all these things in the chat here after a couple minutes. But Kuryanagi Tetsuko is the most popular and most admired woman in Japan. And her talk show was started in 1975. Do the math. How many years she's been doing the same show? I just can't believe. And there's a great review of Toto-chan by an Indian author named Suma Narayan that I'll put in the chat as well. So comparative education. Let me end my talk by just my personal experience. I became interested in educational anthropology because of my sons. I wondered what kind of life they were going to have. And they are now, let me do the math here. The older son is 45 and the younger son is 43 now. So they have established themselves in their lives and all. They attended Japanese schools until the end of the 9th grade, the American 9th grade. So the end of Japanese middle school. The compulsory schooling in Japan is up to that point. And almost everyone goes to high school in Japan. Almost everyone continues into the secondary school. One thing to note about Japanese schooling, all facilities are equally provided. Every school has a gymnasium, every school has a swimming pool. They all have the same facilities. So there isn't an advantage, at least on the surface, for those communities that are richer. However, there is an advantage to those people with money in the sense of tuition academies, after school that we call in Japan juku, these tuition academies. And of course, there is private and public education, and in order to get into the top private education, and in some cases the top public education, you have to take exams, and there's an examination hell. The saying is when you are studying for those exams, if you sleep 5 hours, you'll fail the exam. If you sleep 4 hours, maybe you'll pass. So you can see again this question of the mental health of children, kind of a big question. Higher education has been open to all from the 1990s and 2020s. When I was first teaching in Japan, about 50% of the high school students would go on to university. Now it's about 70%. And my own sons went to Japanese primary school, and it was a receiving school for returnee kids. So they were rather used to dealing with kids who were a little different. And at the same time, they cleaned the classrooms, they cleaned the toilets. Every week they were doing these things. The value of hard work and effort was certainly there, and the value of democratic education. When we had parent-teacher conferences, the teachers would emphasize to us the importance of effort, how important effort is, and socialization. Do they get along with other kids and all? So there are a couple of words here that I'll share with you. Otagai. Otagai means to think about other people first. We can also call it omoyari, to also consider others first. Otagayu, think about other people first. So you listen and you think about other people first. As a Japanese say, you read the air. You read the air. What should I be doing next? And achievement comes later. Interesting in my case, in our case, so my sons went to a typical Japanese primary school, typical Japanese middle school, and they learned these values that I mentioned. And at the same time, they had very good training in mathematics and in science. And I tried to teach them at home, English and history, maybe less successful at that. But they decided for high school, they wanted to go to, I said, which would you like to do? You could go to an international school, the one that I used to teach at, or you could go to a Japanese high school, or you could go to an American public high school, or you could go to an American private school. And I had myself gone to an American school called Phillips Exeter Academy. Exeter is probably the best high school in America, although the brother school students, Andover students, would disagree with me on that. But if you've seen the movie Dead Poets Society, that was my high school. And that school was where my two sons decided to go. And I was really worried about them because they're going from typical Japanese school, all in Japanese, all Japanese medium, to this really powerful high school in the United States. It turned out when they tested that they were 2 years ahead of the typical students at Exeter in mathematics and a year ahead in science. And they had gone to just a normal school in Japan. Okay. Maybe a little bit, maybe not right at the middle school, but a little bit higher maybe, but still typical school. Their English and history, yeah, they were maybe 1 or 2 years behind. And in their dormitory, it was a boarding school. In their dormitory, they helped their friends with math and science, and their friends helped them with the English and the history. And then my sons had an easy subject they could take on the side, which was Chinese, because they could already read and write the characters. And then at the same time, the structure of the sentences is the same as English. So, okay, well, I think I maybe end for now, and I'll put these links into the chat here, but I'd welcome your questions and comments. And I know we're set to go for an hour, but I could go a little bit longer if you all would like to do that. So, Randhir or Ananta, do you have any comments, or are there some questions which I might address?
Thank you so much, dear David, for this many-sided, enriching contribution. Thank you. So now we welcome questions, comments, and reflections, please.
Feel free to write them in the chat too, if that's easier for you to do that. Let me look at the chat to see if we've got anything here. Yes, thank you, Frida. Thank you, Frida. You've got quite a few things here. And I'm not sure what you mean by Japan education. In Japanese education. Annual exam starts from which classes? Oh, so in the middle school, they would start doing exams, and especially in the second and third years of middle school. So those years would be 13, 14, 15 years old. And they're not just annual examinations. There are lots of tests. How many hours of class do the students have in a day? Well, they start school at 8:30 in the morning, usually finish by 3. And of course, the curriculum includes lunch breaks and this and that. I also forgot to mention, primary school students serve each other lunch. So everyone gets a chance to check that out as well. I just put in the chat, the Toto-chan link there. And let's see, Frida, you asked also about teaching hours in an education. So how many hours of training a teacher should go through in a year? It is quite an intense study. I did supervision of student teachers in Japanese schools, And that training, thank you, Dr. Ramratan, also why the training is compulsory for a teacher. You need to have at least a couple of years of training in university to become a teacher. When you become a teacher, when you join the schools, you receive an older teacher who will be your supervisor. And that teacher is with you for a couple of years. That teacher is given release time from their own duties to supervise the new teachers. So there's a great deal of camaraderie involved in this as well. Yeah, so I guess those are some thoughts here. Other questions that you all might have? Anything else I could answer here? I've been impressed by the respect that teachers are given. I think that that's at the bottom of much of this. Other questions or comments?
David, what we will do, we will assemble a few questions together. We will assemble a few questions together, then you will
Sure.
find us.
Sure.
So very nice. And just to begin with respect, the respect of teachers, and also the dynamics of conformity and a sense of hierarchy that is there in Japanese.
Yes.
How does it interact?
That's a really interesting question.
What I request is that you can kindly take note of a few reflections from other friends also, and questions, and then we are enriched towards the end by your reflections.
I'm listening, and I'll be putting in some links also in the there.
So that is very interesting. This whole respect and hierarchy, and whether in the process there is a kind of a post-hierarchical movement happening, with the democratization of education and certain kind of, that is one thing. And then on the intercultural realm, like in the high school, for example, what is the opportunity for learning other languages? Because in Japanese education, a Japanese society, there is a primacy of Japanese language, and whether that is changing, and whether children are learning Japanese and other, beginning with other East Asian languages. Of course, in Japan, Chinese language is very much part of that because of the cultural link. So this is a few queries to begin with. Other friends, please.
Please don't be shy. And Minati, yes, Minati, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Professor David, for a very deep and eye-opening presentation. When we were talking about the satire of formal education, I was just thinking in our India setup. The formal education is given very, very much importance here. I mean, the certificate is more important than the skill. People think that if you don't have a formal education, probably you will not have a better life in the sense like earning capacity and other things. So that is why here we get a lot of satire of formal education when we find the quality is missing. What about Japan? How it is being taken there? I mean, how the decolonization of education, how much it helps. So thank you for the opportunity.
Wow, good question. Thank you so much. I'll address that along with Ananta's questions here. Let's see if we've got some more questions. And please let me know, Randhir and Ananta, how long we should go too. So.
And maybe now, Professor Anand, J.S. Anand, please. Am I audible? Yes. Professor Anand, please.
I guess Professor Anand has maybe stepped away. Arundhati Yena has got a question also. I see that one. I'll address that one too. It's a good one about gardening. Mhm.
Okay. So maybe given you can kindly help us with these three questions, please.
Sure. Happy to do that. And I did put in quite a few different references there to help people with understanding some of these things. So I'll mention for Arundhati Yena first, gardening and other life skills in the curriculum. Yes, children do learn to plant things. The schools will have gardens. I think they need to do more of that myself. That's my opinion, but I'm a big supporter of gardening. But it is part of the curriculum, and nature is a part of the curriculum. They often have school excursions. One of the major excursions is to go to Hiroshima, and the children will fold paper cranes. You may know the story of Sadako Sasaki, the Japanese girl who was exposed to the atomic bomb, who said, maybe if I make 1,000 paper cranes, that's a symbol of peace, of course, make 1,000 paper cranes, then I will recover. And of course, she didn't recover. We saw her cranes actually last week. The tears just came to my eyes after knowing the story so well. So there are extracurricular activities. And of course, sports is a big part of Japanese education too. And the children have every year a sports day. They also have every year a day for concerts and music and drama and so on. But sports is very important. Many children will do sports outside of the school too, to be on soccer on football teams or whatever it might be. So there are those, what we might call extracurricular activities, are considered part of the curriculum in Japan. So your questions, Ananta and Minati here, about the formal education and certificates being more important than skills. Same ideas here. It's all over the world. The diploma disease, a great scholar of Japanese education, Ronald Dorr, called it the diploma disease, that we are just focused on that all the time. But it is the standard that we measure things by, but it shouldn't be the only standard, should it? And we are finding out with artificial intelligence and computers and all that, yeah, you don't necessarily need that standardized education. And this is particularly true when it comes to foreign languages. So there is a move towards having more foreign languages in the schools, even the elementary schools. However, the way that English is taught is still less of a communicative approach and more of an approach of being able to read English than being able to communicate. It's changing. We're seeing some changes, especially at the primary level, where we have teachers from abroad coming and teaching Japanese kids. But, frankly, Japanese children don't need other languages. Everything is self-contained here. It's not like India, where you need to have multiple languages. And that is a deficit, I think, for the Japanese side of things. However, they do try to make up for that later on with studying English, and it's very popular to study English conversation in Japan, for example. Really interesting, important questions from you, Ananta, about respect and hierarchy and how those interact with each other. In the background of Japanese social structure is Confucianism, and it's come from China, and it's patriarchal. At the same time, in Japan itself, it's mediated by the idea that there should be some reciprocal activity between those on the top and those below, those below and those on top. So there is an interaction between those two. So the person on top has a great responsibility, and the person on the bottom also has a responsibility, and they need to interact with each other. And that is also about listening carefully to each other. You know, I think that respect and hierarchy, it has changed. It's not the same respect and hierarchy that it used to be. But the post-hierarchical movement in education, not too much of that here, not too much. I would say that it's been looked at and people are curious about it, but they maybe feel it's not so necessary. The society functions well as it is. There's almost no crime in Japan. Streets are clean. All people live longer than they live in any other country on earth, both men and women. Yeah, so those are some questions there. And then I had another question about, is there a loss of human capital in Japan after they complete higher education, like doctoral education? So for example, do they leave to go to other countries? That did happen previously. It's not happening in the last 20 years though. It was happening in the 1980s and 1990s. There was a loss of human capital, particularly women, because there have traditionally been far fewer opportunities for women later. And yeah, I guess those are some answers to some of those questions. Not now. I wouldn't say there's been a loss of human capital now. To the contrary, Japan, the population's getting smaller. The birth rate is below capacity for reproducing the population. I'm not sure that's a bad thing. You know, we have this growth model of economics in mind that we have to keep growing and growing. Our planet cannot sustain this growth model. You know, it's Deepesh Chakrabarty's work on the planetary condition. We're no longer in the global condition. Forget about the global condition or globalization. We're in the planetary condition now. We better pay attention to the planet now. And we can't sustain the growth model. So in Japan, the number of older people, the median age for farmers is about 69 years now. Can you imagine the median age for farmers at 69? So we are seeing a big change, I think, in terms of the labor market falling off. And we can see that directly, right? We've been back in Japan now for over 2 months, and we can see it when we go to the grocery store. We see it when we go to the restaurant. The service is slower because they don't have enough labor, or they're not paying the labor enough. I mean, that's the other question, isn't it? So class questions come in here as well. And great question, Grace. Is there similarities on Japan and China in terms of education? Yes, basically very similar systems for the middle school and the secondary school and university, very similar, oriented towards examinations. By the way, the examination system came from China. The Mandarin system of selecting bureaucrats was what the British saw, and they modeled that, and that's what came to India and came to Japan. So bureaucracies actually are coming from the model that was came from China. So similarities Japan and China in terms of education. Also in the background, the Confucianism, even communist China, the Confucianism is still there in the background. It's still there. I mean, Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution, they tried to throw it out, and it didn't work. I visited Confucius's hometown of Chifu in China one time. This was 1984. The Cultural Revolution, it was just ending, and there were still big character posters around and all. And our guide said that the Red Guards tried to find Confucius's tomb. And I said, I asked him, did they find it? No, they couldn't find it. And I said, why not? They didn't dig deeply enough, he said. So that's a kind of metaphor for the influence of Confucianism on the society. So, okay, do we have some other questions or comments?
Thank you, David. So maybe this is the beginning of much more connected dialogues and explorations. And this seminar also is an inspiration for us with many changes, both of us being very busy, you and me. But we had also thought about an edited book on creative education. So with your seminar, we'll pick up that thread. So now I invite Minati to take us forward in our journey.
Ananta bhai, anybody else? Professor Gyan, he's not been invited to share his views. He's there. You can invite if he would
So
like.
Gyan, please.
Yes, excuse me. I have some problems here. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was really
Grazie.
very interesting. And I was wondering about the question of if I have correctly understood about the preparation of the work of hands and the work of the mind, because if I'm not mistaken, there is, for instance, John Dewey in the tradition of the pedagogical education, which insists on these points, which was at the time not dealt with in the schools, or at least not dealt with enough in schools, and insists in his writing very many times about the importance of an equilibrium between the two kinds of education. And anyway, not to oppose the education of minds and education of hands, in order not to have also a society which has on the one hand the mind worker and on the other hand, so to speak, the hand worker. So in order not to have a class society which is which implies a division of mind and hands, so to speak, and insists very much on this point in his writings. And I was wondering how precisely this point, which is of course very important, has been realized in the different schools and in different ages of school in Japan. That is, which are the methods? There is something about the school programs which cultivate this compenetration of the two and coexistence of the two kinds of education. This what is practically made in the different ages, if it's possible to say something about this. Thank you very much. It was really very interesting. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Grazie. Thank you so much for your question, your comments. John Dewey had a great influence on Japanese education in the 1920s, similar to the United States. The actual implementation of the ideas is another question. And you are right to ask that, to what extent. From my own observations of primary schooling in Japan, they do a good job of that. And there's also quite an influence from Maria Montessori. By the way, I learned recently that Maria Montessori was a prisoner of war in Kodaikanal in India for 4 years. So there's something I just learned. I taught in Kodaikanal for some time and go back there often. And so Montessori and Dewey are inspirational figures for Japanese education. The question then becomes, later in the education, what do you do about sorting out the workers in the society? And that sorting function, of course, does replicate the class system. It does shunt people off to manual jobs or to white collar jobs. But there is less of a distinction in Japan between those. There's less of a distinction between those different areas. And moreover, if we look at the class structure of Japan, the average CEO in Japan is making somewhere between 60 to 70 times the income of the average worker. In the Americas, it's now 500 times, 600 times. So as a class society, the classes are a lot closer to each other in Japan than in India, than in America, than in many parts of Europe. So there is an idea that you should employ everyone, that everyone should be employed. The society to be stable needs that. and that you also continue the education. So there are continuing education seminars, and those might involve things like learning flower arranging or tea ceremony or pottery craft, and people often go on their own to do studies on their own. There are so many night schools to learn things and all. I met my wife through one of those schools. I was teaching the New York Times and some other things there. So so other questions or comments here?
So lovely. Maybe today the time is embracing us, so we can move ahead. Minati, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ananta bhai. On behalf of Socialism and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, I, Minati Pradhan, would like to thank for today's our chief speaker, Professor David Blake Wills, for his beautiful presentation and very insightful presentation. Thank you, sir, so much for responding to all our queries and answering all this with patiently. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Professor Ganluji for being present with us, and as usual using